And here guys, we can see all of our pieces, and this shouldn't be too hard to put together. So if you have any experience in assembling anything, this should be straightforward. Now at the same time, if you've never assembled anything before, this might be a little challenging, but we're gonna go step by step and hopefully this video will help you. All right, so we need to check a few things. Now one of those things is the frame. Make sure the frame is sitting level. So if it doesn't wobble around side to side, that means it's quite level. Now if it does wobble, what you want to do is you want to untighten these bolts on each side, and that'll let it go to where it's flat, and then we can tighten them up. But in any case, we want to go ahead and check all these bolts also. Make sure they're tight, because over time they do loosen, and they loosen quite a bit. Like this one was very loose. And same thing on this side. I want to check it, make sure they're nice and tight. Again, this one is very loose. So we found quite a few loose bolts, and we want to tighten everything up, because the more solid the printer is, the less problems we'll have in the future. And also what's quite important, if we flip the printer around, you can see there's 4 bolts right here. So these 4 bolts is what holds the y-axis. So if these are loose, your whole y-axis could move around. Because it's pivoting here, there's quite a lot of leverage on each end. So you want to make sure that these are tight. So we're going to go ahead and check these. So these are pretty good. And this one is completely loose. I mean, it wasn't even tight. Look at that. Wow, that's crazy. And this is why it's important to check this. This one is quite loose also. All right, so now that we know these are tight, we'll be confident that our y-axis here will not shift like this. And so the next thing you want to check is your bed. So the bed has rollers that it rolls on the channel, and they're usually loose, and mine are loose. And that's a good thing, because you rather have them loose so you can adjust them right than have them too tight and, you know, wear out. And if they're too tight, they'll definitely mess with your print quality. So we're going to grab this wrench, and hopefully you guys can see, but there are rollers right here. There's 1, 2. These are stationary, so they're not adjustable. But if we go to the other side, we can see we have eccentric nuts on this side, and this is what this wrench is for. And what we're going to do is we're going to stick our hand in there, and we're going to feel which roller is loose. And it feels like it's that back one right there. And so what we're going to do is we're going to grab our wrench, and we're going to turn it just a bit, and that should tighten it up. Okay, and that actually did tighten it up, and it seems to be about right. Now the way I like to check these, if you stick your finger in there and you actually spin the roller, you can feel how much tension it's pushing on the rail. So if you go in there and you twist the roller and it spins on the rail and you can feel the friction, that's how you can tell how tight they are. So if you can't spin the roller at all, it's way too tight. If you spin it, the drag is quite heavy, then it means you need to loosen it. So what you want to do is you want to get to the point where the drag is quite light, and at the same time the bed is not moving. As you can see, the bed doesn't move, but the motion is very smooth and easy. So if you feel any kind of like jumpiness or anything funny, that means your rollers are probably too tight. Or it means that maybe your belt is not running true on these pulleys. So we also need to check those. And speaking about the belt, I can see here on the front, we are definitely not running in the middle. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try to loosen the belt completely so that it's loose. And then I'm going to go underneath the bed, and I'm going to make sure that the tab that goes and hangs onto the frame is all the way across where it needs to be. I'm just going to use this larger wrench and push it over, and also check the other side. So now I'm going to tighten the belt, and we can see the belt is running a lot more truer, basically almost right where it needs to be. So adjusting all these things will help to the overall experience of the printer. All right, so I think it's time to whip out the manual. It looks like we have a few more things in there. So there's an after sales warranty card and how to contact the company. And it looks like a little thank you note. All right, so let's see what the Ender-3 version 2 manual looks like. So compared to the old days, Creality has moved up quite a bit in how they provide the information, and it's all very nicely laid out. So here we can learn about the printer and what all the parts are. Here we have the basic parameters, all the pieces that are included. You can see there's quite a few of them. All right, and here we have step 1. And out of curiosity, there are 9 steps to building the printer, and then step 10 is bed leveling. So for step 1, we're going to need these larger channels, and they are plastic wrapped. And this is what they look like. They're actually 2 different channels. As you can see, there's 2 little holes here on the side, and then we have 2 larger holes up higher on the other one. So if we look at the picture here on step 1, we can see the one with the 2 holes up high goes on the right side as you're looking to the front of the printer, and the other one with the 2 little holes goes down on the left side. So the one with the 2 little holes will go on this side, and then the 2 separated larger holes on the right side, and the holes are on the inner part of the channel to the inside. So let's grab our hardware that we're going to need in this bag. We do have the Z-axis switch here, and we're actually going to need this in this step also. Let's take a quick look what else is in this bag. So we have, looks like some caps for the profiles, M5 T-nuts, our micro SD memory card with a USB adapter, some more bolts, and the ones we are going to need right now, which are the M5 45s, a couple of PTFE tubing couplers, and an extra nozzle, and some clips. A belt for our X-axis, an extruder knob, and this is a nice little touch. So this goes on top of the extruder so you can visually see it turn, and also turn it manually, kind of like a little knob, so very nice. And of course we get a little bit of sample filament that looks like to be white PLA. But we are after these M5 45 bolts, and we need 4 of them, but there are 5, so I'm not sure if that's extra or needed somewhere else. We'll find out. So I'm going to remove one of the channels and we can work on this one. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put the bolt through it, and then we're going to put our channel in correctly like this and start the bolts with our hand, and do the same for the other one. Grab our wrench. So what we want to do here is we want to just snug them up and not tighten them at all. We actually want them a little loose. This is quite important because we're building out the whole frame on the upper gantry, so we want everything to be aligned correctly. Alright, so I just barely snugged it, and you can see the channel still moves around back and forth and twists around. And that's what you want. You want it to be moving around at this stage. And we're going to do the same thing on the left side, the little holes down. Alright, so we got this channel snugged up, but it's moving also. So in the first step, they also want us to install the Z-axis switch. And this is what that looks like. It's in its own little separate bag. And it is a little plastic bracket with the switch on it. And if you guys look at the bracket, you can see that there's a little nub here sticking out. And this part that sticks out is actually gonna set right here on top of the channel. So it goes in like this. There's a couple T-nuts we need to loosen up. So the T-nuts move around. We're gonna align them up and down like this. So we're simply going to go into the channel, and then we're going to go all the way down, and there's a little stopper here that will stop it, and it'll sit right on top. So once you're all the way down like this, what you're going to do is you're going to unscrew the bolt a bit and then screw it back in, and that should turn the T-nut inside the channel and lock it in. And so this is our Z-axis end stop switch. So for the next step, step 2, we have the Z-axis motor and rod. So the motor and rod go just behind the switch here, right in the back of the channel. And here is the stepper motor. And we can see that the bracket's already installed on the back of it. And so that simply just goes right here. And the 2 little holes are for mounting this motor. So we will need 2 M418 bolts. And so the bolts will go through the bracket and then into the channel. Now the motor does sit a little bit off of the bottoms. Now here's something to consider. If you tighten these bolts all the way, you might tighten them where the motor ends up sitting a bit crooked, because it does fluctuate quite a bit on all these parts here. You want to make sure that you're not leaning side to side anywhere. And that leads us to our next step, which is putting the lead screw in. And that'll simply go into this coupler, just like that. Tighten up this little bolt here that'll compress the coupler and hold the lead screw. So let's go ahead and tighten that up. Now the best way to line this up, what you want to do is just eyeball it here where it's as level as possible to the top on this channel. And if it looks pretty close, just tighten it right there. As you tighten it, it might move, so keep an eye on it. Alright, so our Z-axis motor is on and the lead screw is tight on the coupler. Make sure both of the bolts are nice and tight. So for the next part, we're going to move the printer out of the way, because on step 3, we're going to be building the X-axis assembly. And so we're going to need one of these 2020 channels. And there are 2 of them, and one of them has a bunch of holes, you guys can see, and the other one just has 2 holes on each side. That's the one that goes on the top of the printer. But this one here, this is where all of our parts to the X-axis will go on. So this is where we're going to use our extruder / X-axis assembly here. We'll also need our belt. We're going to need our M416 bolts. And now we can put this thing together. So it might be a little confusing, even if looking at the manual, because, you know, it is a little strange how this whole piece goes together. And so the best way to know which side goes where is that if you look at these little holes, the 2 that are closer together go to the assembly, and the ones that are farther apart, those go to the idler bracket on the other side. So this wallowed out area here with the 2 small holes actually fits over this bolt right here. So if we take our channel and we just go down onto the bolt, well, you guys can see that. I'm just going to go down just like that, and then these 2 threaded holes will accommodate 2 bolts that will go through here. So let's grab 2 of our M416 little bolts. So there's no easy way to do this, but the bolt goes through here, and you can fit a wrench on the other end. So I find that if you put the bolt through the hole first, like this, and go ahead and put both of them through there, and we'll grab our wrench and go through the outside here, put our channel on there, and then try to start it. So this part could get a little finicky, but if you have a little bit of patience, it should go pretty good. And then I'm going to go ahead and tighten up the bolts really good. And that's how that piece goes on. So for the next part, we're going to take our hot end assembly that goes from the printer. Make sure your wires are not tangled or anything and they're pretty happy where they are. And we're going to point the tip to the bottom and we're simply going to roll it onto the channel. Just like that. And so now working on this side, we have this bracket. And these two holes here are for bolts for these threads. If we flip this thing around, we can see there's another wallowed out area. And that's where this bolt fits in right here, just like that. And here we can see where the two M416 little bolts go in. So let's go ahead and tighten those up. Snug. And this is how the bracket mounts. All right, and so this is what our X-axis assembly looks like so far. So it's not very hard to build. A little bit confusing on how to install the parts, but as you guys can see, not something that you can't do. So we've done step 3, we've pretty much done step 4. So for the next part, let's go ahead and install our belt. And this is not as hard as it seems. So you're just gonna grab one end of the belt with the teeth pointing down, and we're literally just gonna put it right in the channel like this. And so then what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our hot end and we're gonna run it over. Just like that. And when we run it over, it's going to be underneath the wheels of our hot end. And then we're going to feed this thing all the way through into our X-axis motor. And we can see it comes out from the top over there. So now we need to grab it and we're going to pull it out a bit. And then we're going to loop it back around underneath the sprocket. And it's basically going to come out at the other end here on the bottom. So not very hard. Go around the sprocket. And so now we're looking at the bottom. And here on our hot end, we're simply just going to go into this slot right here. Just like that. So now we can pull on this other end and that should tighten it up. So looking back on the top, this is just going to go around and then back to itself right here. But we can't do that yet because we have to install our idler tensioner here. And this is this piece right here. And so this tensioner pulley actually comes apart if you unscrew this knob here. And I think this is probably the best way to do it. So if we unscrew it and just push it through, it should come out and you guys can kind of see what that looks like. So it has a little rail system that it slides into here. So you can't really get it wrong putting it back together. And so now we're going to take our belt and we're just going to go through the idler pulley. So before connecting the belt to the hot end, we need to go ahead and reassemble our tensioner. And the way this thing goes, the smooth area here is the front, this is the top, and the longer slot is the back. So it's going to go in just like that if you're looking at it from the front. Now you will need to take this bolt out if you went ahead and put it in. And that's because this bracket here goes right over it. So what we're going to do is we'll grab the idler and we're simply just going to slide it back into where it was with our belt in it. Put our little knob on so it doesn't fall out. We're going to leave that quite loose for now so we have plenty of room to work with. And now we're just going to simply slide right over this channel here. Now there was a little bolt that was included with the pulley adjuster and that goes in the front. So let's go ahead and tighten that up. And then our original bolt goes back into here and we're going to snug that up. But we don't want to go crazy tight because we have plastic here. And that's how the idler pulley goes on. We're going to go around to the hot end and we're going to hook the other end of the belt into the slot. Just like that. And we want to tug on them just a bit to make sure they're set all the way down into the slots. And so now our belt is on and we can go ahead and tension it up a bit. And you want to be very light on this because here you can't really tell how much you're tensioning it. Always feel the belt and make sure you're not too tight. Like I already have it too tight and I didn't even really know that from here. So we want to run this back and forth and make sure our belt is running true on our pulleys. And so this is how the X-axis assembly goes together. So we're gonna grab it. Now you wanna make sure that none of your wires are twisted. So if you have to twist this thing around back and forth, but mine looks about right where it is. And so these rollers here will simply go over the channel. So let's go ahead and feed them in. Now we still have our lead screw and we can see it right here. And we need to feed it into this brass bushing. And so we're simply just gonna line it up and then twist it here at the coupler and we can see how it walks right in. So making sure all of our stuff lines up, we're just gonna go straight down. So we can go ahead and push on this and it should go pretty straight. And here you'll be able to kind of tell if everything is lining up really good or not. And so for the next part, we're gonna be installing our brace that goes up here. And we are gonna need our M5 25 bolts and there are 4 of them. And if you look at this channel, you can see there's a wallowed out part that goes to the top and the normal end goes to the bottom like this. That wallowed out part is for the bolt to fit in. And so what we want to do here is we just want to barely snug it. We want it to be loose still. Because right now we're at a critical point where our whole frame or the top gantry part is adjustable. and we want it to sit in the most natural place where it wants to, where there's no binding. And so now we can really adjust everything correctly because our bottom channels here are not tight, so it's all still moving. The top is not tight, so our space between these brackets should be already automatically adjusted since we're all the way down. And we need to check our wheels, make sure they're more looser than tighter. That way nothing's under strain. So now that we know that these are pretty much where they need to be, we can go ahead and tighten them from the bottom. And you want to make sure these are quite snug, but definitely don't over tighten it. Same thing for this side. I'm going to go ahead and tighten them up. So now we know that we are good down here. Well, let's go ahead and bring this up to the very top here. So now the spacing between these two channels is going to be just right, and we can go ahead and tighten these bolts on the top. So yeah guys, as you can see, if you take a little bit of extra care of how you assemble it, you can get everything spaced out just right. And a lot of people don't realize that this goes a long way to getting that perfect print on the bed. And so the little test you can do by knowing nothing's really binding is if you just push this down, it should go down really easy without any kind of binding or jumps in it or anything. Alright, so for the next part, let's go ahead and adjust our little roller. So we're going to do the same thing here as we did on the bed. Eccentric nuts on here are on the inside, on these two rollers here. So we're just going to tighten it up just barely. Okay, that's probably a little tight. Let's back off just a bit. And there we go. So I can spin that quite easy. And these spin also a little bit. Same thing on this side. Good, good, and good. Alright, and so our x-axis is nice and solid and it's not flexing back and forth. Now since we're on the rollers, we can go ahead and check out our hot end here, and we can see that there's two rollers on top that are stationary and then the adjustable ones on the bottom. And it actually looks like it's exactly like it needs to be. So if you do need to adjust it, the eccentric nut is underneath here, and so you just spin it a little bit back and forth until you get just a light drag of all of the wheels. And so when you move it back and forth, it should have a very smooth motion. No jittering or any kind of jumping or anything. It should be very smooth. So we are on step 7 and we've installed the top brace there, adjusted all our wheels. And on this same step, we actually installed the display, which we have right here. And there's a bracket here in the back and it looks like it does pop out. That's interesting. And if you guys can see, there's 3 bolts with T-nuts going through there, and they simply connect to this channel here on an angle like this. So we're gonna grab a wrench and loosen all these T-nuts so they can move around. And then we're gonna line them up with the channel. So these 2 will go on the bottom slot and the one here will go on the top. So I'm just gonna go flush right here. And so my panel will stick out a little to the front, but you know, you can go as far back as you want or forward. So that's 2 and the third one. So that is solid as a rock. So before we slide the display on, let's go ahead and plug it in, and we'll simply plug it just into the display like that. And now we can slide it back on just like that, and it actually clicks in. And as simple as that, our display is on. Alright guys, so we got a couple more steps left. So step 8 here is installing the spool holder, and then our little profile covers, and also the extruder knob. So let's start with the spool holder, and that actually goes up here. So the metal part is actually going to face backwards like this, so the nice part will be facing away from the front. And then we're going to take the nut off the round spool part and thread it through there, and then put the nut on, and then use your hand to turn the spool part of it, and the nut will tighten up. And that's it. And it's going to go somewhere over here. And our hardware for the spool holder is in separate little baggies. So we have 2 T-nuts and we have 2 bolts in 5/8mm. So we're going to grab the bolt and put it through the hole here, and then start the T-nut on the bottom of that. You can see how the T-nut goes. And we're going to do the other one the same way. Alright, so now we're going to go to the printer and set the T-nuts into the channel on the top here. And I'm going to go this way as far as I can. And we're going to tighten it right there. So we can go ahead and snug these up. But don't snug them too hard because you'll damage the channel on the other end. And so this is what the spool holder looks like. So the spool will go here, and then the filament will feed into the extruder down here. And so while we're up here, we can go ahead and grab these profile covers, and there's 2 of them, and they go right here. So there's sharp edges here, and this is to protect the side so that you don't get cut. So these just simply press on, and if they're not going on good, you can just tap them a little and they'll pop right in. And same thing on this other side. All right, looking nice. So here we're looking at the extruder. We need to go ahead and install a coupler. So there is brass threads, and that's going to be a nice connection there. We can grab our wrench and tighten it up. And while we're here, we can go ahead and connect our PTFE tubing, and that's simply just inserting it into the coupler. And so the coupler's job is to grab it and hold it. Now Creality does include these little clips, and there's a couple of them, I guess, and one extra one. And you definitely want to use these. So what you're going to do is you're going to spread these two pieces apart, and then you're going to put this clip in here, just like that. And that's going to ensure that it locks it in really good and the PTF tubing is not going to be moving around. You can go ahead and install the knob. Now if you noticed on the bottom of the knob there's a little flat spot, and on the motor there's also a flat spot, which is right there. So what you want to do is line up the two flat spots and then insert the knob, just like that. So now we have a little knob here that we can use to push filament in and out. And also while it's printing, this thing will be spinning so you can see that it's moving. Alright guys, so we're really close to being finished assembling everything. The only thing we have left to do is plug a few things in and we'll be pretty much done. So here in the front we can see we have a couple plugs, and one of them is the motor, which goes to the back, and the smaller one is the Z-axis switch, and they are labeled. There's a little yellow label that says Z on here. So the switch will click into here, and then the motor wire we're going to send to the back and connect it right here. So it's actually quite a tight fit, but it does reach, and that's how it goes. So on the back of the machine we have a few more wires. Since our hot end is already connected, we don't really have to do anything there, but we do have this other flat cable here that comes out that has a few more plugs, and they are labeled. So this one says E, X, X also, which is a smaller one for the switch. So the E is for the extruder, and that simply goes right here, and then the X larger plug is for the motor, and that clicks right underneath. But the X switch is actually inside this housing here, and you can maybe see it, but it's a little hard to reach, but it clicks in right there. So, and this is where all these wires go. And the wire that comes from the hot end actually has a little place where it can clip in right here, where it's kind of held. But yeah guys, that's pretty much it. So all of our wires are already connected, so everything else is connected, and we're pretty much good to go, except for one thing that's very important, and that is in the back of the printer. And you can see right here, that is the voltage setting. So depending on where you live, you want to switch that to the right voltage. So I need 115, and it's on 230 right now. So I'm gonna go ahead and switch that. So make sure that you check this before you plug your printer in. It's very important. So yeah, and that is everything with the assembly. Now the only thing we got to do is put our glass bed back on. So the build plate is glass. There's a little protector on top of here, and we can see we have that ultra base style coating on it, and we get a nice little Ender logo here. So you do have a choice. You can print on this, or you can print on glass. It has glass on the other side. So we're definitely gonna be using the ultra base. I really like this stuff. When it's hot, it grabs the filament, and then when it cools off, it just pops right off. Now the interesting part is these clips here. And to me, this seems a little bizarre how the bed is held, but I guess we just clip it back on like that on both ends. And that should be good enough. And it seems like it's holding really good. It just, I guess it's a little bit unusual, but in any case, seems to be fine. And it looks really, really nice.